Once the military aspects of the ceasefire are squared away, diplomatic efforts to resolve the situation in the Gulf will move to the forefront.
Well, joining us live right now to discuss what those diplomatic efforts might entail is Boston University Middle East expert Farouk El-Baz. Dr. El-Baz, what do you think the odds are that Saddam Hussein will remain in power?
I think right now he might remain in power, and people in the Gulf area could live with him, provided that his military might is cut down to size, which we know has already happened. So there is really no need to get rid of the present leadership of Iraq right now.
What role do you think the Soviet Union will play? It's already tried to play an important role in the peace process. What role will it have now in the post-war Arab countries?
Very little, because the Soviet Union has tried to play the peace game, and it did not work, so they will continue along this line. But I really think that the whole situation is in the hands of the United States of America and the Allied forces. And these forces will definitely be able to create the proper setting for the diplomatic structure in the post-war era.
Apparently the biggest losers, other than the Iraqis themselves, could be the PLO and a person that you know well, King Hussein of Jordan. What do you foresee their roles are going to be, and how did Hussein ever get himself involved in such a fiasco?
There is no question about the fact that the Palestinian cause has suffered from this event, and particularly perhaps the PLO leadership. However, I also believe that the Palestinian cause might benefit in the near future as President Bush and the rest of the allies would go in and try to solve this particular problem. And that will be helped by a perception in the Arab world that America does not run to save only the state of Israel, but it will also run to save an Arab state. And that will help create the proper setting for peace in the post-war era.
All right, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Little juice in a box.
The war is won, and now comes the task of shaping the peace. What happens to Iraq, and what happens to the entire region? Who wins and loses in the new world order that George Bush is now talking about?
Joining us this evening, Middle East expert Elaine Hagopian from Simmons College, and BU's Farouk El-Baz, former science advisor to the late Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Thank you for coming by tonight. Let's begin with clearly one of the central figures of this whole crisis going back over how many months now, nearly 7, Saddam Hussein. There's this working assumption that he's not going to be around much longer. Elaine Hagopian?
I would suspect that if we don't get him, if we haven't got someone roaming around to try to assassinate him in Baghdad without our going there, that he may be kept just as a figurehead for a short period of time and eventually will be put out by his people. He has consistently miscalculated, taken them into 2 wars when the odds were really against him. And there's no reason why the Iraqi people would want to keep him. I would assume that the Revolutionary Council will attempt to do something about that. How they'll do it will be another question.
Who replaces him? Isn't there a power vacuum there?
This is really a very important part of it, RD, because of the fact that the political structure there is the Ba'ath Party, and all of the party members are tied through the pyramidal structure to the figure of Saddam Hussein. So maybe if we get rid of Saddam Hussein right now, the whole structure would collapse. So maybe it is better to have Saddam Hussein continue with his arm tied a little bit and his forces cut down to size to keep the country glued together, because it is important to keep some semblance of power in Baghdad.
President Bush is talking about a new world order. How do you see the post-war makeup? Who are the big gainers and the losers? Elaine?
Well, I think at first I would like to point out that something people haven't realized, and that is that the United States, for the first time in its contemporary history, is directly involved in Arab politics. We used to operate diplomatically country to country, but now we have coalition partners that we have to please in some way for their role. And that may be rather difficult, because while Arab governments in the past have been rather incompetent about dealing with their societies, they're very good about dragging people into a quagmire. So the problem, while Bush may have a particular idea of what he wants to do with the Gulf and other areas, the problem of working out those alliances plus our situation with Israel is going to be a real problem for us. If I might just add, there's another problem we have, and that is we've got to create 2 kinds of images of Arabs, the good Arabs and the bad Arabs. And we have to create 2 kinds of images of Muslims, the good Muslims and the bad Muslims, because the fundamentalists are clearly there.
Let's refer to the map as we talk about trying to come up with, shape the peace out of this 100-day ground war that we have just been through. Here's Iraq sitting in the middle, clearly. The United States having built an alliance with Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Egypt, Israel sort of standing off on the side and restraining itself, but certainly supporting the coalition effort against Saddam Hussein. Jordan supporting Iraq. This is an awful lot to put together. What's this map going to look like a year from now? Farouk El-Baz.
Well, actually, the map is not going to change. It's the geology of the land has changed because of all of the activity there, but the geography will not. I really think that it is part of the coalition, and the United States of America is pushing right now for some stability in the region, and that stability would require a government in Iraq that controls things on either side of it also.
Is this best achieved by an Arab solution or an Arab-dominated solution rather than a Western implemented or imposed solution?
I think that we will try to put the Arabs up front, but in fact we'll be the players behind the scene. And I think what George Bush has in mind are his cohorts, and I think Baker may differ slightly, but I think he will have a much more direct control over the Gulf. We have always been the backers of the Gulf families, primarily because they have served our interests. There'll be more as a protectorate in a sense. It will be much more direct. I think with Syria, we're not quite sure what to do with its leader, but clearly Syria cannot be a major force in the area because it has no allies. And so it has positioned itself to say that it would like to talk to Israel about a solution. It is getting on the side of the U.S. to see what payoff it can get. Egypt is firmly in the U.S. position. The question really comes down to Lebanon and the Palestinians. And I say these two things because the Palestinians are the ones that you have to eventually deal with. Will the PLO be marginalized? Will Yasser Arafat be marginalized? Will the Israelis be rewarded by doing something about the Palestinians more to their liking, i.e. putting them somehow under Jordan, if not transferring them there, but putting them somehow under the control of Jordan?
One other major concern right now is the rearmament of Iraq. We know that in the past the Soviet Union has armed Iraq, Libya, Syria. Do you think that it's possible to count on Russia not to do that again?
Yes, I think in the aftermath there is every reason to believe that there will be some sort of a sanction to say that no more arms to the Middle East, and particularly to Iraq, because the alliance is going to leave Iraq with some sort of power, some sort of military power. The military of Iraq is not going to be completely devastated. They will leave a little bit to hold the country for defensive purposes, but then they will make sure that the faucets will be turned off for a while.
I think that's quite clear. But I think there'll still be areas of instability, and as you know, in Lebanon, the Ta'if agreements, which governs it, was agreed on earlier. It also calls for the removal of Syria and Israel from Lebanon. Will the United States reward both of them by allowing them to stay there and have their various cut of Lebanon? And if so, what will happen to the Palestinian population in Lebanon if there is not a comprehensive Palestinian population? Many areas of instability in the area.
We may find that building the peace may be tougher than winning the war. Thank you, Elaine Hagopian and Farouk El-Baz. Up next, we'll check sports this evening, take you to Winter Haven. Stay with us.